the MC for this afternoon's party, this wonderful publication party, also a pre-kickoff to the celebration of the Women's Suffragist Centennial. There are a number of wonderful, talented people who will share this area this afternoon, so you are in for a treat. Besides the snacks, there are some other treats. But this is a publication party. It's an opportunity to do signings of the calendars. Also an opportunity to see a number of the wonderful items, products that the Syracuse Cultural Workers have produced in celebration of this event. But when I mentioned that we're going to be doing signings, I wanted to be able to say to you who were expecting Sally Roche Wagner to be here that she's not here. Keep her in your prayers. She's recovering from a very bad accident. Is my understanding, and I hope it was okay to share that. It's out of the bag now. But she did sign a number of her books. It's a new book, The Women's Suffrage Movement, and in it features I believe over 80 original documents written or spoken. Thank you, Vanna. Written or spoken by the women who roared. And I say that because that is the title of the Centennial Calendar, Women Who Roared. Sally's book is the main source for that Centennial Calendar. But all of the presenters this afternoon, you'll hear them all roar through their gifts and the talents that they've been blessed with. And one of the first folks that I'd like to introduce is Karin Franklin. And I was doing a little research on her, and I didn't realize it's Dr. Karin and Suni Cortland. I love this woman. I do.
Ditto.
She believes, as many of us do, that music has always been an important part of social change activism. And when you think of the civil rights movement, you think of United Farm Workers movement, you think of women's rights movement, think of the music that has pushed those efforts along. Colleen has written a song especially about the centennial and Sally.
Yep.
Roche Wagner, and here's Colleen.
All right. Oh, okay. I just have a question. Who did this quilt? Oh my God, it's so beautiful. Yeah, so as Karin said, thanks Karin. Sally, I've written a couple of songs based on Sally Roche Wagner's work. And this is one of them. Sally wrote an essay called Dangerous Women, and so it was so inspired. She's always been so inspiring to me to tell the real story of suffrage. So this song is called Dangerous Women, and I didn't make a YouTube of it. I found out you can take a PowerPoint and just put it over to iMovie, and you got an idea, so it's really easy. And so here we go. And there's some images that are from the cultural workers too on that video. So Dangerous Women. Women won the vote in 1917 in a fight for restitution and equality. They put their bodies on the line, held hunger strikes and picket signs. Dangerous women, yes, but a bittersweet victory. It's dangerous to stand alone, dangerous to say your body is your own, dangerous to break from tyranny. Well-behaved women don't make history. How dangerous are we willing to be? Did you know for more than 1,000 years, Haudenosaunee women had it better here? They were equals, held the land, chose justice. It's dangerous to stand alone, dangerous to say your body is your own, dangerous to break from tyranny. Well-behaved women don't make history. How dangerous are we when you leave? Now there are women whose wisdom knows no age, like Elizabeth Cady Stanton or Matilda Johnson Gage. They knew that liberation can only be for each and all, and they learned from native neighbors, and they heeded that call to know that none are free when one of us is not. Stanton and Gage, remember their names, while others retreated, they remained steadfast always to the claim that the vote alone is not enough to change, no matter what the danger. It's dangerous to break from tyranny. Well-behaved women don't make history. The vote was won, but who remains outside? Whose voice suppressed when class and race divide? Be like the mothers of the clan. Take back power to our hands. Know where we are and where we ought to be. Bend the arc to our authority. Be dangerous. Be dangerous. Yeah, let's get dangerous to make our history. Presente. Yes. She's an inspiration for this because of the idea of dangerous. You know, she had looked up the etymology of that, you know, the origins of it. It's really fascinating because to see kind of how it really is tied very much to authority, you know. And I also reference, you know, bending the arc of justice, you know, to our authority. So all the, you know, the ancestors carry on that.
Thank you, doctor. We needed that medicine. We really did. I know it's not the same kind of doctor.
You don't need this microphone?
No, I'm loud. They told me I don't need one. Vanessa Johnson is a griot storyteller, an artist, a Renaissance woman, and she puts social justice issues in your face, I think. She puts them in your face through her one-woman shows as well as her mixed media creations. Vanessa served on the Women's Suffrage Centennial Calendar Committee, and now she'll take us on a journey of that calendar and this movement. Vanessa.
So you're not going to get to just sit there. So I'm going to need your help in telling the calendar. So we're going to use the title itself and say, "Hear us roar." Okay, so please.
Hear us roar.
Okay, I'm expecting the building to shake just a little bit. So one more time.
Hear us roar.
There we go. So I'm a griot. We're going to tell this calendar. This calendar about history that's worth repeating. This calendar about women's voices and from the past and women's hands from the present that created the images that you see. This is a journey through time, through space, through hope, through expectations, through history. Hear Us Roar, Roar 2020 Women's Suffrage Centennial Calendar. And who's doing the clicking? Okay. I'll just go. It all began on this land that we stand on, this land of the Haudenosaunee that we must recognize, we must breathe every single day. It is their world that became the model for European women who had few rights. It is the Haudenosaunee that led the way, that choose the chiefs till this day. They have right to their children in divorce till this day. Who can stop wars and not give permission for them till this day. These women who are life givers. These women who give life to the planet in 7 generations expected. These women who give life to the nation. That give life and keep their history. This life that was imitated and desired by the European settlers. Hear us roar.
Hear us roar.
Troublemakers, trouble takers. It was the abolitionist movement that provided a place for these women to have a voice. Because, see, they were taught to be silent. They were taught to stand back. They were taught to be subjugated by men. And yet, the abolitionist movement, this movement to give those who were enslaved, to help them in their freedom taking, this movement provided a space for women to roar within, to organize, to take a public platform at a time when women were told, when you speak in public, when you write your words, you are prostituting yourself. Hear us roar.
Hear us roar.
This declaration of sentiment that was created in Seneca Falls in our state, in the first Women's Rights Convention. This declaration of sentiments that began, we hold these truths to be self-evident, a mirror of our Constitution, a Constitution taken from the ideas of the Haudenosaunee. This Constitution that set the groundwork for the Declaration of Sentiments. A sentiment that will be reworked in 2020 by high school girls across New York State, who will confirm what was said before and what do we have a right to as women, and who will rewrite this document in 2020 in New York State from their perspective and this time, because we know that the fight goes on. Hear us roar.
Hear us roar.
There can be no peace until the cause of the war is destroyed. And what is that cause? Slavery and nothing more. A battle of words that we are still fighting in this country today. Folks saying people were not enslaved, they were servants. But Matilda Joslyn Gage knew what the battle was all about. She knew what the war was all about. She knew that women had to be the keepers of freedom. And so she raised money to send troops from upstate New York. She presented them with a flag and what that flag was for, what it stood for. Freedom. Freedom for everyone. She believed that no one could be free if there were people who were still enslaved. And brought back to our history through Sally Roche Wagner, we hear her roar.
Hear her roar.
How big does the pie have to be? How big does the pie have to be to serve each person a piece of freedom? Does it run out, or does it multiply like fish? So black men were given the right to vote, the 15th Amendment, and still black women were left out. And like race divides us now, how it permeates everything in our society, American society, it split the women's rights movement, the NWSA, the AWSA. Because how big does the pie have to be to give everyone a piece of freedom. We are still debating over that pie even now. Hear us roar.
Hear us roar.
We will not be silenced because everything in women's history has been about silencing us, about controlling us, about limiting us, about blinding us. We will not be silenced. And so in 1876, women asserted the right to freedom, to equality. And they demanded that they too have the same rights as the men around them. They would not be silenced. They roared, they marched, they wrote their legislators, they protested, they chained themselves to trees and to buildings because they would not be silenced. They would be free. Hear us roar.
Hear us roar.
Until the Jocelyn Gage again. Because she has been forgotten, we made sure she was in this calendar. It is the sarcasm of the 19th century to represent liberty as a woman, while not one single woman throughout the length and breadth of the land is yet in possession of political liberty. As yet in possession of political liberty. The Tea Party was about people in this country saying no taxation without representation, that we had a right to voice, we had a right to be a part of the political liberty of this country. And yet women were left out of that political right to vote. How can anybody call themselves a democracy if women, half of your nation, is not allowed a voice? Hear us roar.
Hear us roar.
Ida B. Wells pushed her way to the center of the march. See, black women have been told to march in the back behind all the state delegations. Each state had a delegation, but women were to march in the back, behind the men that marched with the women. And yet she and several white allies decided to totally reject that, to take the freedom to be in the spaces that we want to be in. And so she pushed her way to the front of the delegation from Illinois, along with white women who stood by her side in solidarity. Excuse me. None of us are free if we do not have allies to support our freedom. And Ida B. Wells was supported by allies. And she claimed her space in history. Hear us roar. And so you do have to be a little crazy. You do have to be dangerous. You do have to be a woman who is willing to risk everything for your freedom, for your right of place in America. They were jailed. They were force-fed during hunger strikes. Women here in Syracuse, New York, marched the streets and were arrested. Everything had to be laid on the line for their freedom, for their right to vote. This is one of my favorite pieces in the calendar. We look at her face and we see a mirror of our own desires for freedom, for equality. Hear us roar.
Hear us roar.
The 19th Amendment finally votes for women. The right to vote. How many of you have the right to vote? And yet the fight still goes on. It went on after this. As a black woman, especially those who lived in the South, you did not have the right to vote. You had to count gumballs. You had to recite the Constitution. These arbitrary measures of whether you deserve the right to vote. Women were given the right to vote in the 19th Amendment, but it was not for all women. And still now, we have this freedom being taken away from us. Gerrymandering, the closing of voting centers, the closing of departments of motor vehicles where you need to get your ID to be able to vote. This fight for suffrage in this country still continues. There are still women who cannot vote today. Our elders who cannot find birth certificates, who do not have the paperwork to vote. The 19th Amendment was supposed to guarantee votes for all women. And yet the fight continues. Hear us roar. Let's treasure this image by Ellen Blaylock. Recognize what this image speaks to. It speaks to a whole history, an arc of time, of women fighting, of women battling, of women making space for themselves in the American dream. This dream of democracy, of multiculturalism, of many faces from around the world, of those who came to colonize, of those that were taken by genocide, of those who were chained in fields, of those huddled, tired masses that yearn to be free in this country. And these women across this arc of American history, they are the image of what we've achieved, of what America can achieve in this dream that we have. This history that must be taught to our girls and to our boys, to our godchildren, to our grandchildren. Shirley Chisholm on the left said that discrimination of women, of stereotyping of women begins when we are held up from passing out from the womb and we're slapped on the butt and the mother is told, it's a girl. It is only us who can give a new meaning to the pronouncement of those words. It's a girl. It's a girl. Hear us roar. And so, in this arc of 100 years, we have come to this place where women have claimed their space. This place in our Congress. This place as governors. This place as mayors. This place as city council women. This place of leadership in our nation. Be you black or white, Latino, Native American, be you Republican, Independent, or Democratic. We have come to this place where Washington, D.C. roars with the voices of so many women. It is our hope that women have a special love of life because life comes through us. Like the Haudenosaunee, we are the life givers. We have a chance to create a world where all of us are equal. All of us have what we need. All of us are respected. None of us are rejected. This place called America, these spaces, the dream of those who fought in the suffrage movement, this dream they have passed to you to continue to fight for. Hear
us roar.
Thank you.
I told you she put social justice issues and awareness in your face. So she took us on a bit of a journey through this calendar. But when you purchase this calendar, every single day, every single annotation that will help you further this journey is in here. Ms. Johnson did not give herself credit for the mixed media piece that she had done that you saw in the calendar of Ida B. Wells Barnett, but that was a piece that she had done, which is just absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. So with the calendar, you get to have Vanessa come to your house. Give you a little bit of a preview of what's going on for a donation. Ellen Blaylock, who is credited with doing this magnificent quilt. She's an incredible quilter herself. Ellen and I know each other from journalism days. Ellen is a quilter, photographer. She's a Renaissance woman extraordinaire. She's a narrative artist. And she gives voice to people who need to be heard and listened to. And she does it through photography, video, drawing, and fiber. I mentioned that we're friends from journalism days, and I had no idea that she had all of these other hidden talents. She had a wonderful show here at Art Range, and I left just in shock as she stalks me. I left in shock and was glad that as I was walking out, she was walking in, so I could just give her a hug and tell her how much I appreciated the beauty that she shares through her artistry. I mean that. Yeah, okay. You're right. She managed to create this visual masterpiece. And it's titled The 100th Anniversary, 100 Years of Progress and Disappointments.
Who titled it that?
One of these, Syracuse Cultural Workers people, you know how they this special piece is featured in the calendar. And Ellen will be here.
I titled it the Suffrage Quilt.
It's the Suffrage Quilt. You can title whatever you want. She'll sign the poster. She'll sign the calendar. She'll sign your arm if you want her to. And she also has a beautiful angel quilt poster that's over there that you'll have a chance to see. And she's anxious to talk to you.
Yes, I am.
Ms. Ellen Blaylock.
My father, I think he just assumed that I would get married. And he really just expected that from his only daughter. He had 3 sons, and he understood that they had to get a decent job. It was my mother who said that I needed to be educated because she never wanted me to be in a place that I did not want to be in. So it was my mother who was basically my backbone. It was my mother that made me understand the role of a woman. And she used to always tell me these things about, oh yes, your father, he wants me to be a Sumi. And that was her little word for barefooted and pregnant and just stay in the house. And my mother could not do that. She was carving her way through what she needed to do for herself as a woman. She wanted to be an educator. First of all, she wanted to be a missionary in Africa. But see, she realized her mission field was right here to work with children. And that's what she did. She wanted to work within her community. So my mother was one of my first pathways to understand who I am as a woman. Another thing happened. I went on one of my first protest marches. It was when the Philadelphia Police Department bombed Booth. It was the first time in the Palatine section, which is around Drexel University, and they had basically a house that Booth had occupied, and then the police force came in and they bombed the place. It was during Rizzo days. And what I did with my baby in arm is I marched on City Hall with my son in my arms, and there were rows of cops just waiting for disobedience, just so that they could hammer you. And it was a peaceful demonstration. When I was in undergraduate school, I'm going to give away my age a little bit because I am a baby boomer. And it was in 70, what year was it? I think it was in 70, either 77 or 78. I'm listening to this graduate student, a white man, tell this other graduate student, a white woman, oh, because of women's lib, women have arrived, so there is no point for women to protest anymore. Now, this was back in 1978, and I'm listening to this, I'm like, what the is it? Where? What is it that he is not seeing? And now we have moved 40 years from that point, and where exactly are we? That's what I feel. And then, when I went to graduate school, Syracuse University, and I also talked to other young women who are going through their undergraduate programs and graduate programs in art, and they tell me the exact same thing that I felt when I was in graduate school at Syracuse University. This man came up to me, white man. He asked me, why do you make the kind of art you make? Don't you know that nobody is interested in it? He's telling me nobody's interested in me, in hearing my voice and what I got to say. So, in saying all that, thank you. Thank you. What I try to do with my art is to give things a voice, to make things that need to be heard scream. And I might do it in a soft kind of way as a visual artist, but our voices as women, as people of color, as children, all voices are important. And when you are moving around the art world, my voice gets totally, well, it's at the bottom. It gets washed away. And still continue to this day. The same thing in talking to young women. Nobody wants to hear what we have to say, or we're not important. When, it's crazy because people still want us to find our place, to be the wise. If they find out that you have talent, you know what you're good for? You're good to help them move forward. And a lot of you women know that. Oh, so you can write? Oh, translation. You can type? Translation. Oh, you can do this? Okay, so you're good with this and this and that and that and this. Okay, so what that means is that you can be my proofreader because I need someone to help me with this or this and that. And a lot of times that is the flow in some relationships, that when men recognize your talent, they're just checking stuff off like, oh, so what can I use this woman for? You need your own voice. And you need to move forward. And Dik asked me to do this piece. And this was part of my journey because I don't feel spiritually, I benefit, yes, from the women's movement and the suffrage movement, but it has not been my journey. My journey basically have been other things that deal with civil rights, and I'm working on a new project now that deals with mental illness and trauma in the African American community. Some of you know some of the other series that I have done that dealt with teenage African American fathers and things of that sort to give things voice. This too was an important piece to do because this connected me to my sisters and it connected me to a sisterhood, my womanhood in a way that I did not move in, that still needs to be a part of my journey. So, Dik, thank you for the opportunity and thank you for inviting me to do this piece, and thank you for thinking of me. because it also continues to be a function. So really, I have nothing more to say, and thank you.
So what's the real title of this piece?
I still call it the suffrage.
It's the suffrage quilt. No matter what anyone else says. As Ellen says, her work really speaks to the voiceless. And when you take a close look, it'll move you, it'll touch you, it'll scream at you. So don't just look at the poster that's there or what the piece, where the piece is placed in the calendar. You must come up close and personal to this, because every piece that she does is close and personal. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you. Dik Cool is the publisher and co-founder of the Syracuse Cultural Workers. And for those who don't know, the Cultural Workers is a progressive publisher committed to peace, sustainability, social justice, feminism, multiculturalism. Before Dik became the publisher and co-founder, he was in jail. He was. He resisted the draft. He spoke against the Vietnam War, and he was put in jail. And at the time that he got out, there were people saying, "You're absolutely right. We shouldn't have been doing this." But he had to serve time. So, fast forward, he worked at the Syracuse Peace Council. And one of the signature pieces, products of the Syracuse Peace Council was a peace calendar. They stopped producing it, I think, after the 11th edition, maybe. I should look at my notes, but I'm not. 11th edition. At that time, Dik left the Peace Council and he began the Syracuse Cultural Workers. And the peace calendar became the signature product for them. Dik likes projects. One of his other projects, the Cora Foundation. And the product of the Cora Foundation is this lovely place we are in right now, Art Rage. Another one of those in your face. Art here definitely roars all the time. It's a wonderful place. And before you leave today, you must take a look at this exhibit on refugee experience. Please do. And also before you leave, you have to take a look at all of these wonderful, wonderful items that speak to the centennial, that speak to injustice, and all of those things that we care very much about. So Dik is now going to talk to you and take you on a journey through this year's Peace Calendar. Are you not?
I am.
Here's Dik.
Hello, everyone. Andy just reminded me that we haven't made any provision for questions and answers. So maybe at the end, all the people who have been part of the program could come up and people could ask questions if you wanted to for a little bit. Does that sound like a good plan? Okay. So I want to start by just introducing the people who are on the calendar committee, the Peace Calendar Committee. And just to give you a little bit of understanding of how it's done, there is a committee of people who actually decide on the editorial part of the calendar, that is what's going to be in it. And then there's separate people who actually do the production work on the calendar. The major person who does the production work is Max Hill, who's our production and design coordinator. They could not be here tonight. So let's see, calendar committee members. Andy, right here, is actually taking over coordination from me, really, in the last 4 or 5 years, although we don't acknowledge that too much. Karin in the back at the computer. Karin is our longtime art director, and she, other than myself, she's the person who's been on the calendar committee the longest. except for the first 4 or 5 years, Karin has been on the committee. Even when she was working at the bakery downtown, she was on the committee. People remember the bakery?
Yes.
On the right.
Ray Kramer, right here, is on the committee. And Wengiosto Myers is on the committee. She could not be here tonight. She's a member of the Onondaga Nation. And Donna Tarbania is on the committee. Some people will remember her. She worked for the Cultural Workers for many years. She's living in Buffalo now. She's a committee member by Skype. We're using some technology to do that. Hello. And then I also want to mention that I thought Jack was going to be. Jack's not here, right, Jack Mann? Okay. Karin and I are also two of the founders of the Cultural Workers. Jack Mano, who I live with and part of my collective, is a third person. Linda Perla was a fourth. She died several years ago. And Jan Phillips is the fifth. She lives in California. And some people probably here still know Jan. Okay. I also want to acknowledge Marie Summerwood. Even though she did not work on this calendar, she was still an inspiration for it. She died in January this year. I'm sure many of you know that. Marie was and I'll actually start with if you want to go to January. This was kind of Marie's idea to do a piece on the sacred. And she talked with Wenji a lot about it as she was ill. And Wenji kind of channeled her in the committee as we were going forward. That's how these things work. Somebody has to advocate for a piece within the committee, or it doesn't make it. And so Wenji did that for this piece that Marie had inspired. Okay, February is Farming While Black. This is Soulfire Farms, which is outside of the Albany area, and they're a remarkable African American organization. They combine community building with supporting African Americans who are farming and are returning to the land. It's pretty incredible work. March. This is on the Equal Rights Amendment, obviously. We decided to do this piece because the suffrage calendar really does not emphasize the Equal Rights Amendment. And with the centennial coming up next year, we wanted to have something on the Equal Rights Amendment, so we decided to do this in the peace calendar as a complement to what's in the suffrage calendar. This is actually a demonstration in 1978 in Washington. 100,000 women participated in it. Anybody here in that demonstration? No? Okay. April. This is a piece from Minneapolis, and it's really a tribute to indigenous peoples as the sort of in the vanguard of water protectors. It's a mural, as you can tell. And over the years, the peace calendar has frequently contained murals. They're one of the best forms of public art expression. That was not planned. May. Frequently, we take historical things that people really don't have any information about. They're not taught about them. And this was a strike by African American sailors in 1944 during World War II after an explosion in Port Chicago, where I think around 300 sailors were killed, and most of them were African American because they were loading the munitions on, and the Navy was not taking proper precautions in loading those munitions. And to have done that during World War II was incredibly courageous to engage in that strike. This is a celebration in India in 2018 of the end to gay sex being a crime in India. That's what this is a celebration of. There's obviously a long ways to go in India. Still, there's a long ways to go everywhere, including the United States. But it was a victory nonetheless at that time. One of the things that we try to do in the peace calendar is we don't want to have a calendar filled with a lot of stuff that depresses people and takes energy away from people, the viewers. So we try to take things that are really horrendous in many ways and turn them on their head and say, this is how people are resisting these horrendous things. We wanted to do a piece on political prisoners for many years. And we worked with this artist, Beck Young, who did these portraits. And we felt it was a way to acknowledge almost all of these folks are still in prison in the United States, where supposedly we have no political prisoners. In each of these cases, of course, there's more information in the calendar itself. The Migrant Memorial Quilt, again, it honors hundreds, if not thousands, of people who have died in the desert trying to reach the United States as migrants. And the quilt is actually fabricated from clothing that people in the Tucson area have found and turned it into quilts. I think there's about 11 or 12 of them at this point. Vanessa talked about this some. Everybody's probably aware of this issue to some extent. I was just reading the other day that one of the things that, in particular in red states, they're taking polling places out of universities because the student vote they know is not going in their favor. So it's just one more. That's not even in here, by the way. That's just one more form of anti-democratic form of repression. But we felt, we thought let's do this. Let's address this issue in a different way. So we, a little bit funny, but it's a serious issue, obviously. It's a challenge inserting humor in the calendar, to be honest with you. This is Ann Altman. And this is the cover artwork. Ann is, we have a number of artists who we've worked with for long periods of time, and Ann is one of those artists. Some people will know her work, The Guardians, which has been a piece that's remained popular for many, many years. We worked with her, so the concepts came from the committee, a lot of them in this. Some were her own, but it was we went back and forth 5 or 6 times, trying to come up with something that we thought really worked. And we didn't want it to be kind of, rhetorical or sort of knee-jerk comments, so we tried to come up with some different words to suggest resistance and, where we're at in terms of the present political moment. I don't think I have to talk about that anymore. This is, it's really an incredible piece. This is from Brazil. They call it the largest mural in the world. And it has these huge portraits of indigenous people from 5 continents, where basically indigenous people have lived and continue to live.
Point out the little people over in that far corner. You see how little the person is by the pole?
Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Little people. No, other side.
Other side.
White shirt.
Oh, yeah.
You get a sense of the enormous.
Yeah, just to give you a sense of the scale. Yeah. They're huge.
All 5 continents are represented in the full mural. This is just one piece of it.
And December, in January and December, we like to end with pieces that kind of are a little bit less political and are kind of restorative in some ways. And we felt this piece really did that nicely. The artist is Jen Bloomer. It's also available as a holiday card. and it appears to be our most popular holiday card at this point. Again, here we work with her a lot on colors because this was originally a black and white piece. Finally came up with something that she liked and we liked. It was a bit of a challenge. Okay, that's the 2020 Peace Calendar.
And I think this is the 49th edition.
Oh yes, I'm sorry. I forgot to mention that.
You have to say it's just the 49th edition.
Next year, the 2021 Peace Calendar is the 50th, and we're going to do some special things. We're not quite sure what yet. We're thinking of doing a book that would contain all of the images historically, and there's a piece in the back of the calendar that encourages anyone to submit. How has the Peace Calendar affected you? What have you done with it? Many teachers use the Peace Calendar, as part of their curriculum. So we invite you to, email us or drop something off at the office if you'd like to make a comment. We're not sure how it'll be used, but we won't use it badly, I assure you of that. And the deadline is February 1st of next year to submit things. Thanks.
So definitely, if you want to see the little people that Karen and Dik were referring to, you must get this calendar. Get a closer look at it. Okay. Karen Kerney. Beautiful name, Karen. I like that name. Karen is an organic farmer. She's an artist. She's an activist. She's the art director at Syracuse Cultural Workers, and she's also a co-founder of the Syracuse Cultural Workers. Karen has talented hands. She has an open heart, and she uses all of that to encourage, inspire, and to also be a voice for those who are voiceless, the little people. And I don't just mean stature. I just mean because they've been squashed and not able to be heard. Another wonderful product of the Syracuse Cultural Workers is the Women's Calendar, which I look forward to all the time. And they've made it small enough to fit in my purse now, or in here, or other purse that ladies have. And here's Karen.
Yes, I've been with cultural workers for quite a long time. I think it kind of saved my life because as I graduated from college, I didn't want to be a visual communicator, as Vanessa was saying, for a corporate world. It would pay a lot to have me help ice their cake. And so instead, I turned up at the Peace Council, met Dik Cool, and started a beautiful, long career creating artwork. And in the early days, we had to generate most of the images we wanted. If here's the theme, Karen, can you do a picture about this? And I must say, we've come a long way to be able to have so many artists, so few collages, and still a very powerful message we're putting out there. This is the Women Artist Datebook. It started with Jan Phillips 27 years ago. She called it Marry Your Muse. She wanted women to work with their voices, to create their culture, to listen to themselves, and to take their artwork forward. And back in the day, there was like annotations about women artists, pretty invisible in the world, as we've spoken. Now we do little quotes at the bottom. But we have a committee of probably 5 of us that get together and get to read poetry to each other, and look at pictures, and choices. And every year we dedicate it to whatever salient point we have. One year it was to, the woman that wrote We All Live Downstream, that Songbird. Somebody. Anyway, it was about the environment. And
Sandra
how,
Steingraber.
Yes. And this one is just dedicated to the intersectionality of feminism, the rising of feminism in the world, the need to nurture that and understand it in all its forms, and to create solidarity going forward. We rise up together. The other neat piece about this, we got a letter from somebody that was just a note saying, you know, my iPhone is not working. It's not keeping me current. It's not working the way I want it to work. And so she'd often given these out to her friends, but last year she chose to use it herself. And it does, in a digital world, turn out to be a kind of a journal, a journey. You know, you have a written document that can record. You can go back years later. I have 27 of these. You know, and it becomes kind of a little document. And my nieces, I know that I've given it to, have just really felt that it's a journal, it's a diary, it works. So enjoy, it's tactile. You can write in it. You know, and the pages aren't glossy. And, cool. Okay. Thank you.
It absolutely is a little journal. I totally depend on it, and I have in my bookshelf each one for each year. Well, we're coming to the conclusion of our program. I just wanted to mention that the Syracuse Cultural Workers has compiled the largest collection of suffrage products that I think you can find. Not just the calendar, but there are books, there are posters,
Buttons, stickers.
buttons, shirts. Dick is making signs to me that I can't see. But there's also a website. Vanna, you're doing a great job. There's a link on the Syracuse Cultural Workers website of people's her story. People's her story. So if you go to that link, you can find all of that stuff. Colleen is going to close us out, but we're not leaving because we are going to have the presenters just come up ever so briefly to answer questions. We're not going to make that a long period of time because we do want to give you an opportunity to take a look at this and to make purchases. And don't forget, I know the holidays are coming up. People don't always pay attention to that, but don't wait for a holiday. Wait to give somebody something because you want them to be enlightened. You want to support the cultural workers. You want to, just because. Just because. And they have wonderful just becauses. Colleen?
Yeah, okay. I hear us roar, okay? So I wrote this song, and a shero of mine is sitting right here, Andrea Rankin, started the Women's Health Center in Portland, and was invited to the White House because of lowering, having an incredible run of lowering teen pregnancy in Portland County. So talk to Andrea after this. And I wrote this song, it's about Hear Us Roar. I was so pissed off hearing about all the draconian abortion laws, so I wrote this song. It has a sing-along, and it's a chorus, and it just goes, keep your hands off my body. And your religion does not govern me. So that's half the chorus. If you get that, that's good. Okay. Well, they're the meanest sons of bitches I've ever seen or heard. Well, I'm the biggest bitch, and I'm having the last word. They eat their pork, pass their laws, and spew misogyny. I am deep, you tell it straight, you will not tread on me. Keep your hands right. Keep your hands off my was thinking a lot about what's happening all around the world, all around the globe, and Holly Neer had sent me she sent a whole bunch of people, probably maybe some of you got an email from her, talking about what's happening in Chile and how everyone, because there's millions of people are in the streets and people are being killed and tortured and hit with these horrible things, and and also the power of song there to unite people. And they were singing everybody, thousands of people were singing Victor Jara's song, The Right to Live in Peace. Young people, it's an amazing, tears will run down your face. And so I thought, and I was thinking about this celebration and, how it's all connected to these world issues, they're happening right now. And so let's sing together. I'll teach you, it's a beautiful song called It Could Have Been Me. And I on the way here, I was kind of thinking of a last verse to go with suffrage. So I'll work on it, but it's okay. But it's a rough thing. If I can get to it, I will. Okay. So it goes. It just says, it could have been me, but instead it was you. So I'll keep doing it. So I'll keep doing the work we were doing as if I were to. I'll be a student of life, a singer of songs. I'll be a student of life, a singer of songs, a farmer of food, and a writer of wrongs. It could have been me, but instead it was you. So I'll keep doing the work you were doing as if I were to. If you can fight for freedom. So if you can fight for freedom, 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 freedom. If you can fight for freedom, I can too. A woman in the jungle, so many wars away, studies late into the night, defends a village in the day. Although her skin is golden, like mine will never be, her song is heard, and I know the words, and I'll sing them till she's free. It could have been me, but instead, right? But instead it was you. So I'll keep doing the work you are doing as if I were to. I'll be a student of life, a singer of songs, a farmer of food, and a writer of wrongs. It could have been me, but instead it was you. So I'll keep doing the work we are doing as if I were to. 'Cause if you can die for freedom, 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 freedom. If you can die for freedom, I can too. The junta took the fingers from Victor Jara's hands, said to the gentle poet, play your guitar now if you can. Well, Victor started singing until they shot his body down. You can kill a man, but not a song when it's sung the whole world round. It could have been me, but instead it was you. So I'll keep doing the work we are doing as if I were to. Students of life, a singer of songs, a farmer of food, and a writer of wrongs. It could have been me, but instead it was you. So I'll keep doing the work we are doing as if I were to. And if you can stand for freedom, 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 freedom. If you can stand for freedom, I can too. students in Ohio and down at Jackson State. I don't remember the other word. All right, I was going to do the women's verse. I'll try it. You ready? I think it's going to be like, let's see. Women on the front lines so many years ago fought for abolition and to defend Wade v. Roe. Now some misogynist bastards wanna take away our rights, but we got a voice and we got a choice, and hear us roar and fight. So I'll keep doing the work you are doing as if I were to. I'll be a student of life, a singer of songs, a farmer of food, and a righter of wrongs. It could have been me, but instead it was you. And I'll keep doing the work you are doing as if I were to. And if you can fight for freedom, and if you can sing for freedom, and if you can die for freedom, 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 if you can work for freedom, I can too. I can too.
Cut down by just
You really are a
or early
doctor.
day.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. What am I doing? Okay, I'm inviting up here Vanessa, Ellen, Dik, Karin, Kerney, Colleen, to just field some questions. So whoever you're asking the question of, just call their name, ask the question, nice and loud, and I'm sure they'll have an answer.
Yes, Ray.
What happens to the quilt now?
It goes home with Ellen.
Any possible alternatives?
We can buy it and
Now, I really had a question that I asked Dik earlier, that what kind of marketing work is happening here to get the work of the calendar and the rest of the products related to suffrage across the country? I mean, the work that has been produced is extraordinary. Both artistically, warming our souls, but also teaching. How do we get that out?
I think that's a question for Annie and Dik.
Instagram.
People, social media is certainly one way, yes, absolutely. People may not be aware of this, but there's several thousand grassroots groups across the country that are already working, mostly women-led, that are already working on suffrage events, suffrage celebrations. They'll be taking place really most of next year. The actual date is August 26th, but there'll be things going on. In Syracuse, there'll be some things, and across the country, there'll be things going on. So we're really trying to reach those organizations and a wide array of individuals. But we are doing a lot of special marketing. We are pretty good marketers, but it's an uphill struggle. You're working with very few resources and working against corporate media that trivializes what we do in many ways. So it's a struggle. I don't want to minimize it. Any help any of you can give, more than welcome. And I mean that seriously in terms of social media. You can make an image, put it on your Instagram or whatever. And I don't even use social media, so but I am aware aware of it. What?
he knows it's a word.
No, Dick, the 26th of August commemorates what?
It's the actual day that legally suffrage for women took effect.
It became effective.
That's right. It was signed by, I think the Secretary of State had to sign it, I believe, on that day. Yes.
So there's this idea that to celebrate the 100-year anniversary of women getting the right to vote, that maybe we should ERA ratify by the 4th of July. 2020 is our now. So I was wondering, how well with you up there could help promote that idea?
Well, we produced a T-shirt on it, and it's in the peace calendar in March. And actually, the ERA is quite close to being, approved. It really only needs one more state, and they thought Virginia was going to be that state, but it lost by one vote in the Virginia legislature.
I think it should be Utah, because Utah was the state that stopped it last time, but I think they would be all for it.
You think so?
And I think it would be a way to help them turn the tide.
There are several, there's several national organizations that are working in the ERA, and one thing you could do is to send them a donation to help that effort, and wear a shirt, and do anything that keeps it visible and active.
And also to do everything that you can to market the word. So many people don't even know what it says. So how can you support something when most people don't know what the Bill of Rights are, or what you read the Bill of Rights and people are saying, "Oh no, that's not a right people should have," but it is our Bill of Rights. So I think the same thing with this document. Many people have never seen it. They've never seen what it says.
You could, since I know how to make a PowerPoint, put audio on, just take the images and audio of you describing it, and let's put it on YouTube. It'd be a very nice way to get it out there.
Or with your song.
Yeah. Well, Dangerous Women is up there already. It's on YouTube.com. Dangerous Women.
All right.
Holly,
Yeah.
is there any way we could get you and Holly Neer in Syracuse?
Yeah. Oh my God, that would be so awesome. Well, you know what? She is coming to Auburn. Karin.
I know she's coming to Auburn in January.
Yes. The 17th.
January 17th.
Part of the Women's March. She will be in Seneca Falls.
Wow.
And I couldn't be Auburn.
Well,
We're trying to get her to come do
you can let the organizers there know that you can mention.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I was really happy to see that she was going to be up there.
Bravo, you also.
Yeah, I've got two or three questions. One point was that in coming today, I kind of had this question. I thought Sally Roche would be here, and maybe she's not. I don't see her. But when I was in Rochester, in terms of suffrage, I discovered getting a cup of coffee on the west side, about a mile out near the Susan B. Anthony House, a brass ballot box. And it's in a very small park, not far from Susan B. Anthony's house on West Main Street. Maybe 700 block West Main, something like that, I think, maybe farther. And it commemorates her getting arrested for casting the first ballot, which I guess she actually put in an official ballot box and got arrested for a few days or some time. And I was just wondering, like as a historical note, if that ballot was actually effective. In other words, did someone remove that ballot? I mean, this is a really tiny question, you might say, but did someone actually end up removing that ballot, or they couldn't tell, and her ballot actually was effectively cast for someone at that point? And it really goes to the resistance. I mean, and the focus of that picture, of course, I think is that she stood up for the right before people wanted it, to give it to her, and she claimed it. And so it was a very significant act of resistance or forward thinking. But the other thing is, and let that rest where I'm not sure what the answer to that is, but one question remains in my mind in terms of the arc of history of the effect of women's votes and how that's been documented as far as what has that changed and how effective has it become in certain issues and stances. And so that's a question as far as who's really documenting the effectiveness of the women's vote. And I'm not sure who has done that. It's probably been done to an extent. But here's my challenge. Men haven't stopped war. It was claimed that the Haudenosaunee women could stop a war. My challenge to women voters is, and I really believe this, that internationally women together could stop wars, because men don't seem to have a good grasp on stopping wars.
But if you do, with wars today and conflicts, women, there is documentation. I know that I wish I had the name of the documentary that you should be able to find on YouTube that talks about women in conflicts around the world and the impact of women on stopping these conflicts, that it is often the women that are raising the consciousness, whose voices and protest and their deaths that are stopping these conflicts in modern day times around the world.
I think it was the Abigail Disney on PBS.
Yeah.
Yeah, she did a whole thing on peace and women.
Peace and women was a
like,
whole series.
Like the troubles in Ireland was one thing, and
yes,
such a different.
But let's remember that a sobering bit. Women are not the answer to everything. 52% of white women voted for Trump.
Right.
Yeah, we have to break it down.
White women.
Women voted.
Right.
Women of color percentage is a lot lower.
And it was what was the election in Alabama where it was black women that kept this pedophile out of office. So I think that women, we are not automatically the answer. We vote for many reasons. We vote for certain needs or certain opinions, or we vote with our husbands. That still happens when you talk to women. So I think it's important that we as women, we have to check each other and raise each other's consciousness, and we have to teach our girls. I worked for Sally at the Matilda Johnson Gage House with the Girl Ambassadors for Human Rights. And I can remember we went to the Noons program, the nickname the Blanket Project, but the what is its official?
Witness to Injustice.
Witness to Injustice. And when we came back to the Gage House and talked about it, the girls were angry. They were extremely angry. That was the emotion that was there, along with sorrow, but anger, because they were like, "Why are we in high school and just learning this history?"
Yeah.
And so in a short way of saying it, they came up with a program that they went into McKinley Brighton Elementary School, where I teach after school, and they're going to be offering it this year in the spring to some other schools, where they came in and they taught women's history. They taught them about Gage, and they taught about the Haudenosaunee women and rights, and did this basic workshop with our 4th and 5th graders called Power to Me. And in the workshop, they used the women's rights movement as an example of how kids today can empower themselves. The kids had a time to talk about what they go through on the south side of Syracuse, how they feel invisible in this world, their fears about being shot by the police. And we talked about what these women were willing to do to change their lives and claim their freedom. So I think we have got to teach our girls. We have to pass this history on, and we have to teach our boys as allies, because our kids need to understand whose backs they stand on.
In the same way, I wouldn't put it just on women to make peace, and I feel like it's up to men. I've been hearing this for 50 years, you know, like women, we have to work with each other, but it really is up to men to work with each other around this stuff and to support Clifford Ryan and people who are out there. But really, it's not just up to us.
Okay, we set?
Let me just mention, you weren't here earlier, unfortunately, Sally Roche Wagner couldn't be with us. She did sign some of these books, for publication of the women's suffrage movement, but she's healing from a serious accident, so keep her in your prayers if that's what you do. Just send good vibes if you don't pray. They work as well.
One of the most powerful things about this book, she does address some of the racism in the movement. She tells a lot of voices, things often that we don't want to hear about some of our heroes and stuff, but it is our history. It is our history.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So she's received some flack for talking truth, but it's a good, really good book. She's a baby.
Remember, Vanessa and Alan and Karen will be signing in the back, signing posters and calendars. And please browse. Thank you all for coming.
Please take time to take a look.